right, guys, welcome back. John Kelly, law enforcement life coach with your Sometimes Heroes Need Help podcast. Guys, I got David Dachinger with us today, retired fire lieutenant from up north. And man, he just confided in me. He's going to be coming south soon, man. It's just too damn cold up there. And he's going to be joining us today. And we're going to sit down and we're talking about all things first responder, man. He has the Responder Resilience podcast. He's the host, the developer of that. And talk about giving back, man. Always willing to have the tough conversations, right? Isn't that what it's about? Having those conversations that we never have in hopes that we can become better with this thing of ours. So without further ado, please help me in welcoming David to the Law Enforcement Life Coach Sometimes Heroes Need Help podcast. Brother, it is nice to finally meet you, and it's nice to see you.
Well, thank you, John. It's a true pleasure to be here, and I think we have a lot of common ground as far as having a podcast as a sort of a second chapter after retirement and a way of being of service and having a purpose. So let's dive in.
Absolutely, man. No, you're 100% right. And so, just for the listener, David, give us a little background on you. I mentioned retired fire lieutenant. What did that look like?
Yeah, this was an interesting sort of life journey for me because initially I had no connection with the fire service, and it wasn't until we bought a house right next door to a firehouse that all of a sudden things started to come into my life.
Like, wait a minute, I can kill two birds with one stone here.
Yeah, so one thing led to another. Invited to a barbecue, come down to the drill. I'm like, this is interesting, and I had been in the music business up to that point, so it was furthest thing from my mind, right? And I just found myself loving it and moving up the ranks in the volunteer department until one day somebody said, you could get hired. You could get hired as a career guy. And I'm like, really?
You're spending all this time volunteering.
Exactly. And it had run its course. I really took it as far as I could in that department, and I was looking for more. So I started doing the testing. I was blessed to get hired kind of at probably an older age than most people. And as far as I know, I was the oldest person to ever go through the Connecticut Fire Academy.
You were that guy in the class that everybody was looking at going, damn, this guy's got some time on.
Yeah, and you know what? I felt like it was a challenge to step up because you had 20, 25, 30-year-old guys in the class who were obviously, in great shape and hadn't put on any of that, that extra weight and slowed down. And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to do my best to keep up with them. And so that was fun. It was actually fun to kind of have that moment of, I had a good base of athletic training through my years, and I, was able to draw on that. So it was a fantastic experience. Also, I think what was really important to me was like show them, or just make the statement that you don't have to drink the age Kool-Aid, like to say
Isn't that crazy,
do something,
right?
Yeah.
We've got this thing that your youthfulness and your usefulness are one and the same. That somehow, once you hit over, once you get over that 40 benchmark, it's a decline. I'll make the argument that I'm stronger and healthier now at 56 than I was at 36.
Right. And there's some data out there that says, like, in terms of things like running, that you actually maintain a high level of efficiency or capability as a runner into your mid 60s. Wow. So, I mean, some of the cultural stuff around age is just that. It's cultural, it's cliche. It's almost like, we've bought into it where it's not necessarily true. And I really loved being able to kind of live outside of that, that paradigm of like,
100%.
You're too old to do this job.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Prove them wrong, right? Prove them wrong.
That's awesome. Had a great career, was blessed to be promoted into a position of leadership. And, but being older, I didn't have as much time, I didn't think I needed to stay in that career as long as some other people, because honestly, there's a point where you say, okay, probably it's impacting my health to not get good night's sleep, almost every night of the week. And it's probably impacting my general, probably mental health to keep doing this, beyond the point where I can be effective on the fire ground. And
Sure.
so, safety is a consideration. You want to be able to carry your weight. You want to be able to, step up when the time comes. And I'm like, I started weighing the pros and cons, and I had a supposed plan for what I was going to do in retirement. It looked so good. I'm like, you know what? I think I'll pull the plug in 2021. And
Okay.
so it brings up a great point, which is plan A is not enough, because my plan A didn't pan out. It was, looked wonderful, but I seriously needed to come up with a plan B pretty quick because I retired and it was not to be. And that's where the podcast came in. I realized I knew two EMDR trauma therapists who work with first responders and veterans. And I was in a peer support group that they facilitate, and watching them facilitate, I realized, wow, we could probably do a podcast focusing on responder mental health with the two of them as kind of like the expert mental health professionals.
Sure.
And so we launched it, and that became my plan B.
That's awesome. And it's funny. So in our work lives, what like we have a plan A, B, C, and D, don't we?
Yeah.
And we're going to make entry here. And if that doesn't work, we're going to go around the side. And if that doesn't work, we're going to hit it from up top. And we'll attack a problem from 6 different angles,
Right.
or at least have the option to, right?
Yeah.
And in our personal lives, we go, this is the plan. Okay, well, what if that plan doesn't work? No, it's going to work. We
Exactly.
don't afford ourselves that same, perspective of, hey, how about a plan B, C, and D, just
Yeah.
in case,
Yeah.
just in case.
It's an interesting topic that you're touching on, John, which is that as first responders, we are there to serve the public and to take care of others like 1,000%. And then there's, for the most part, we don't do the same for ourselves, right? We don't give ourselves the same kind of support or proactive, care that we do to the public. And
Right.
so, yes, when it comes to retirement, that's something that perhaps we should be looking at way before the end of the career. We're starting to do a documentary series on this where
Tell
as we
me
look
about
at it
that.
from a,
Tell me
yeah,
about that.
as we look at it, there's so many aspects to it that I never considered. So what we're talking about, the plan, plan A, B, C, D. And it's also like, the identity crisis that we go through when we leave, that is huge. That's where, when suddenly we have a lot of time, which should be a good thing, but now we're missing the tones going off. We're missing being with our family in the department. We're missing all the adrenaline rush that we got on the job. We're missing the being of, purpose, right? We go out into the hall and,
Slowing down by the traffic stop just to see if I'm needed.
yeah,
You
right.
know,
And those things
you do
now,
it. Oh my God, right?
right now you see a police car going by with lights and sirens, or I see a, fire apparatus en route to a call. It takes it almost, I wouldn't say it's a gut punch, but it is like a little bit of a, I don't know, it kind of takes a little piece out of your soul to know that,
It's always, especially when you've prided yourself on being that guy.
Mhm.
It's time to let somebody else be you.
Right.
It
Right.
doesn't always sit well, right?
No, and it's sobering in that almost the minute you walk out of that department, by nature, they have to replace you, right? Whether you're on the line or you're a company officer, the department has to keep doing its mission. And
Right.
as much as you may have done great stuff, you're still, you're a spot that needs to be filled.
Yeah, my agency didn't wait for me to leave. They were like, "You make sure you train this guy up because we know you're gone."
Uh-huh.
And I ended up retiring at the height of COVID. So literally, there was not that. Listen, anybody who says they don't want to be recognized or acknowledged for 20, 30 years of service, I think is lying to you. But I didn't. I mean, I slid out the back door,
Uh-huh.
and yeah, the agency kept. They didn't miss a beat, and that was kind of like the plan, right? The unit shouldn't suffer. There shouldn't be any lag in leadership because we're planning for your retirement.
Mhm.
But at the end of the day, they're planning for your retirement, but you're not planning for your retirement.
Yeah.
And you spoke of that. That connection is no longer there, but it goes so far beyond an identity, doesn't it, Dave?
It does. I mean, there's, obviously there's for most of us, there's a tight connection with the people we work with there, sometimes to the exclusion of our regular family. And we're
Right.
spending more time sometimes at in our agency than we are at home. We're picking up overtime shifts, we're working holidays, weekends, and that becomes your support mechanism. It becomes your social mechanism, and it may not be healthy because that day that you walk out of and start your retirement, what are you going home to, right? Are you going
You
home
are
to?
200%. You know what? When I speak, I say, listen, we can have familiar relationships at work, but that's not your family. And what we've done is that family is easy. That family at work doesn't take any effort.
Yeah,
It's there.
yeah.
And the family that we need to be putting our energies and efforts to, we ignore for a career.
Mhm.
And then when we need them, when we need the support of a family, a real family that won't abandon us, I think the challenges that get presented in that moment can be startling.
Yes, yeah. And the piece that's almost you can't put a price on is kids. Your kids are growing up on a constant evolving basis where say you get into the job and your kids are 2, 3, 4, 5 years old, and you get out of the job, now they're out of college. Some of the times that we could have passed over that overtime shift or could have passed over doing something extra at the job because
Oh
we
man.
couldn't break away from it, that could have been the soccer game or
Oh,
the
how many times did we tell our family no? How many times did we tell work no?
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
I'll argue with you. We never said no to work,
Mhm. Most
and
of us
that's the
didn't, and it's
realization.
yeah, and it's peer pressure too. I mean, we want to support our brothers and sisters by, say picking up the shift because somebody might get ordered in, or we want to be there because it's a union event and, where everybody's pitching in. And these are tough decisions. It's like, again, if you back up to 30,000 feet and look at your life and how important the family is, throughout your career, but especially after your career, then maybe we would, make some decisions
Yeah.
differently when we have a chance.
And I think that really it starts with having this conversation and continuing to bring some awareness to listen. I have a philosophy when it comes to our struggles with this epidemic of suicide and failure to of self care in our profession, and I won't beat you over the head with it, but so much, if not all of it, is of our making. And at the end of the day, our inability to have those conversations on the importance of maintaining strong family connections and being present and self-care, that manifests itself almost to the point, where we can't come back from it.
Right. Yeah, it's it can't be overemphasized how important it is to nurture that family connection, take care of it. And sometimes it means having tough conversations with your spouse or even with your kids to, do a reality check. Like, am I really there for them while
That
I'm out there, serving the public?
you were listen, I right. If we were to get, we care more about our evaluation at work than we do at home. What if we were to say that to our spouse and our kids? Hey, how am I doing as a husband? How am I doing as a dad? What are we do the ridiculous evaluation where we can improve what our goals are. We don't do that with our family. Like, how can I be a better husband? How can I be a better dad? Are those, have you ever asked the people in your home those questions?
Right. And the piece that also doesn't get spoken about, again, from the beginning of our career, where everybody's gung ho to get into it, and wow, this is the greatest job ever. It is the greatest job ever. But sometimes we're bringing home, the trauma and the drama that we're experiencing on calls, we're bringing that home to our family.
Right.
And maybe dad's not able to, be chipper and friendly and, there for his kids because he's still, got a mental loop going on about the bad domestic he was at last night or the car crash, that was the same age as his kids. These are
Right.
things we bring home and we don't necessarily speak about, but it's impacting our family, like maybe not literally verbally, but we're bringing that energy home, and
Sure.
it's a
No,
tough
there are
thing to.
so many areas that we need to do better.
Mhm.
For not only for our own mental health, but for the mental health of our family and the people that are waiting for us when we come through the door. Um, this documentary. So tell me a little bit more about it. What do we what's the background on it, Dave?
Well, as we were speaking about earlier, we both retired in the last year or so, and so it's a topic that's forefront in my life.
Yes.
And the more I investigated and spoke to people, the more I discovered that there are so many aspects to it, like we're starting to discuss here now, John.
Right.
There's so many aspects that don't really get talked about in the course of somebody's career until they're at the tail end. And that's really maybe not the best place to start planning for retirement. By
Sure.
the way, I don't think retirement is a great word because, it's kind of, I don't know, I think it's got a certain finality to it. To me, it's
Yeah.
like, the end of a chapter, right? It's like starting your next chapter or
Next
life.
chapter. Right.
Yeah.
I'm busier. I'm happier and busier now than I was after a 30-year career. Oh, and let me just interrupt. Um, very jealous. Listen, I had a choice. I could have been a firefighter or a cop, and I'm gonna say I chose. In hindsight, I should have been a firefighter.
I know
You
it's
guys
it's
figured you
it's
guys
something that
figured some things out, man. You sleep,
it's something we hear a
you
lot.
sleep, you get woken up, but you always get woken up. You get
Yeah.
to drive around in the fire truck, blast things with water, smash some stuff every now and then. And the best part of it is you all had a side hustle. Plumbers, electricians, carpenters. I
Yep.
mean, just and the Kelly Day, named after me. I mean,
Exactly.
what
Well, it must have
couldn't
been
get
one of
any
your
better?
relatives. Yeah. That's I have to admit though, now that I've done this podcast for a year and a half, I've met people outside of my little, realm of the fire service where I was
Sure.
working. And I'm talking nationally, even globally, and a lot of people in law enforcement. Now, I used to respond on calls with police officers all the time, had a great working relationship, but I really
Yes.
didn't totally appreciate who they were, what kind of people they were, and some of the aspects of what they do in their job. In this podcast we've been doing, I've met so many amazing people from law enforcement, crisis intervention officers, animal control officers, people that are out there doing stuff on a super high level or leadership levels, chiefs of departments. And I'm blown away by the heart and soul of every law enforcement professional I've spoken to on my show. And I never would have known that or experienced that if I had just, worked in a fire department. So my
Right.
hat is off to all of you.
Yeah, no, it's listen, I think it's a community of caring,
Mhm.
right? On both sides of the house. You care more about others than you do yourself, and that's great for time period X.
Mhm.
And I think the goal now is for between you and I is to bring some balance to
Yeah,
that dynamic that it's great to care about other people, but not at the expense of taking care of yourself and addressing maybe some of the things that you've been putting off, to do this job, right?
right. And in that context, John, if we look at retirement and maybe say you have a 5-year plan to retire, probably getting your finances in order. And one of the things we started noticing is that all of us through a long, 20, 25, 30-year career are accumulating all this trauma, PTS, PTSI. And are we doing anything about it? When we're going to hit that day that we walk out of the department and go home and start our life of leisure, have we cleared the cobwebs or all the demons that are lurking there from all these traumatic calls we've been through? And that's where we realized, as a proactive step, start looking at it like 5 years out, 2 years out, give it some time because it does take time,
Sure.
and find a culturally competent clinician if you need to, who can speak to things and understand what we go through as responders, and use something like EMDR
I was gonna
to
say, yeah.
to get yourself back into a place where you can enjoy your next chapter and you can enjoy your family and they can enjoy you.
Now, for the listener who just heard you mention EMDR, our professions are great throwing around acronyms. So EMDR, tell me a little bit about it for our listener, and why do you recommend taking this proactive approach and maybe unpacking? I guess that's the best way to say it. Unpacking some of the things, some of the boxes that we've amassed, doing it while we're still employed instead of after we're long gone.
Sure. And it's something I would recommend at any time when you feel like your bucket's overflowing. So EMDR is eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. And I think it was discovered somewhat by accident a while back, like several decades ago. And essentially, the person who discovered it realized that in REM sleep, where your eyes are going left and right, your brain is kind of like rewiring itself. It's processing events that happen to you. Maybe they're even highly charged events, and so she was able to recreate that same function of REM sleep by having somebody follow either a ball or use tappers in left and right hands, or you could even be doing it as simply as kind of tapping left and right.
Right.
And
so this is so basically you're in REM sleep, or you're receiving the benefits of REM sleep while you're awake.
There's something about doing that, having your eye movement that simulates REM sleep and enables the brain to take say a traumatic event. Say you had a really bad call, it's looping, you can't seem to sleep, you can't seem to get it out of your mind, you're just seeing the same scene over and over again, or something from the scene is triggering you, like a smell, or the sight of, you see ketchup and it triggers the event because there was blood at that incident. So EMDR, while you're doing some speaking about these memories and doing the eye movement, the brain is actually reprocessing. And so instead of it being this loop thing that you cannot control, it starts to file it away in its own drawer, where if you need to call it up, you can. If you want to think about that call, it comes up, but now it's not charged like this highly traumatic event that happened. Like, by example, I had a call. I was kind of newly promoted, and I was first on scene as an incident commander. Entered the building with a couple of firefighters, and we had a flashover situation, which could be deadly, and fortunately it was not. But that troubled me so much that I could not get the loop out of my mind of this, what I could have done different, what went wrong, so many different elements. And I think as perfectionists, we all want every call to go perfectly, right? We want the best outcome. And it wasn't until I did EMDR that I was able to process it and put it into a file cabinet where now I can call that incident up, but I'm not like obsessed with it. I'm not losing sleep over it. I'm not having anxiety.
Yeah, you're not having this severe emotional reaction to the memory.
Yeah. And it works well for first responders, because first responders like quick results, and it works much more quickly than talk therapy, in my opinion. Sure. And fortunately, there are more and more culturally competent EMDR clinicians out there. So, I would advise, try to find somebody who is familiar with what we do as a profession, because it makes a big difference.
That's great information. You're not erasing your memory. You're not, it's providing you a tool to deal with a traumatic incident.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, what stigma, what negative connotation could possibly be associated with, I'm going to do something proactively so this doesn't mess with my head anymore? Rock on, man. Let's get it done. I think that's a great idea.
We consider it makes you a better cop, firefighter, EMT, paramedic, dispatcher,
better human being,
better human being, better father, mother, husband, wife, citizen.
And I think, being in this space now, that wasn't a thing 25, 30 years ago.
Yeah.
And it might have been out there. Who the heck knows? But there was no tool. The tool was alcohol, right? The tool was just for. I realized not too long ago that forgetting about an incident isn't dealing with an incident. Not thinking about it doesn't mean that you have a handle on it.
Right.
All these lies we tell ourselves. No, I'm good. I'm good. I'm good. As long as I don't think about it or expose myself to anything that could potentially remind me about that event, I'm good. So what does that mean? You walk around with, cotton balls in your ears and dark glasses on? I mean, what are we doing to ourselves?
Yeah.
There are
And I think
so
one way
many
or
things.
another, it's gonna come up in some way, shape, or form. And we're as responders, we are kind of at a disadvantage when we retire. We typically don't live as long as the general public because of
Right.
all these things we're talking about, whether it's toxic exposure or traumatic events or the stress, sleeplessness, things that we've kind of lived with for decades. So yeah, I'd say why not try to do anything possible to enhance and extend your life into retirement.
Dave, I have a question for you. I don't know. I know how it was on the police side of it.
Mhm.
We almost looked at not sleeping as a badge of honor. Like, I haven't been to bed for 2 days.
Yeah.
And like, that wasn't, you were like, all right, fuck yeah, man, that's badass. Like,
Right.
way to go. Right. And it's only now that I'm surrounding myself with people and clinicians that are, far more intelligent than I am, that it's like you realize the impact and the negative consequences of, let's call it what it is, sleep deprivation, and how we equate that to health, longevity, and performance.
Yeah.
It's troubling. Was there that same kind of sentiment in the firehouse, or can we hold that as our own in the police side of the world?
Well, as you mentioned earlier, we had the opportunity to go back and hit the pillow, but I think still in a lot of ways there was a whole macho culture about, staying up longer, working, 72-hour shifts or
Sure.
who could press the most, do the biggest bench press. All those things fit in there, right?
Right.
But the truth is, like you're saying, John, the science is now out there about sleep, and it's not just sleep, but alcohol impacts our quality of sleep. Caffeine impacts the quality of our sleep, and obviously if we have a lot of, rumination going on, there you go.
The phone,
The
the
phone,
damn
right.
phone
Yeah.
impacts the quality of our sleep.
Yep. So there's a fascinating book out there called Why We Sleep by Matthew Walker. I highly recommend it.
Why we
Um,
sleep.
yeah, Matthew Walker. He's also got an amazing podcast, and you start reading about some of the aspects of sleep that we really don't, maybe we're younger, we don't care so much about it, but you do start to notice it as you get a little older.
Sure.
And they're connecting it with your immune system, right? Being able to fight off whether it's cold, COVID, cancer. Sleep is integral to our bodies being able to maintain itself.
And I'll make the connection. If we're not going into REM cycles of sleep, we're
Yeah.
not rewiring, repairing our brains,
Mhm.
which is why we have EMDR, because we're not getting the rest that we need. So we're trying to repair those connections while we're awake. If
Yeah.
is did I oversimplify it?
No, I mean, I think that's correct. And again, you add in the other aspects of it. Sometimes we're taking medications to help us sleep. Those also basically don't allow us to go into the same deep state sleep that we normally would. It's a recipe, right? A recipe of several ways that we're not experiencing the best quality sleep possible. And so, yeah, it's something that maybe the culture is going to change a little bit. We were talking recently to Chief Neil Gang at
Yes.
an old
Yes.
police department, and they have a Zen den, but I think they also have a little power nap room for
Yeah.
officers to come in and take a power
Uh-huh.
nap. And I love that idea. I think if we can make it not against the grain to take a nap when it's feasible to do it, um, how great would that be?
Because you know what happens when we don't? We end up crashing on our way home after
Yeah,
being up for a day and a half.
yeah,
That's what ends up happening. Uh, Spoke with Neil about that. He's a great guy, just doing some progressive things for his people. And it starts with caring.
mhm,
He cares. He cares about the physical and mental health of his people.
yes,
And he's not afraid to put himself out there to get it done.
yeah.
Um, Good stuff. Good stuff. Um, transitioning from this conversation on sleep and how that impacts our mental health, where do you what are some additional challenges that you see facing our first responder community moving forward into 2023? There's been a lot of advances. I think having these kind of conversations would never have happened 5 years ago.
Right.
And so I think in a relatively short period of time, we're making some advances. But there's still a lot of people out there. I've got friends that are amazed that I have a second career, in this space. They're like, what the hell's wrong with everybody? It's like, all right, well, not everybody's thriving, so how do we, what's your take on some of the challenges facing the mental health of our first responders moving forward, Dave?
One big piece of that, John, is leadership. And alongside retirement, I think leadership is another topic that I've become fascinated with. And especially because I was, mid-level leader, I saw how important it was, but also the challenges, like how difficult it was to do all the things I had to do as a company officer, taking care of the apparatus, taking care of the staffing, taking care of the overtime, taking care of running the calls, and the sick, filling in for someone who's going to be sick the next day, making sure that everybody's healthy and safe. Well, then what they don't teach you in officer school is what about, and you're taking care of the public, but what about your guys? Are they okay? Is their family thing okay? And so we need to really be looking at the leadership, not only at the top, at the chief level, but also at the mid-level, company officers, the sergeants, lieutenants, captains, and are they able to give their members the attention and care so that they're able to do their job as best possible. And if they're having a problem, if they're struggling with alcohol, if they're struggling with a family problem or a financial problem, help them connect with the right resources so that they can get the help they need and go back to being effective on the job.
Caring, knowing your people, making their health, physical and mental health, a priority.
Right.
Groundbreaking, groundbreaking, Dave. What these are some core tenets that should have always been in place, and they have fallen by the wayside. My theory is that we care more about building relationships with the community than we do about building internal relationships between our own people. And that I think leadership is starting to wake up to the fact that we've neglected that component for far too long, and that if you want healthy people in your ranks, you got to care about them.
Right. And is at a time when recruitment and retention is really a difficult stage, right? So we need to be doing everything we can to attract the best people and keep them.
You know who I think would be a great guest for your show? Tom Rizzo.
Uh-huh.
Are you familiar with Tom?
I think we may be connected out there, but I don't know him.
Great guy. He's up in Jersey. Wrote a book, Kopakazi, and
Oh yeah,
he's speaking to leadership moving forward, and his take on it. And I think he's right on the money. This whole we don't have the applicants that we used to have, and it's not because we're not paying them. It's not because a very small segment of society doesn't care for them. It's because of the environment that we've created. It's within our agencies, there's a toxicity. And then, maybe I don't want to be a part of that. I remember coming in the early 90s. I mean, you were stepping into a brotherhood, of a sisterhood.
right.
And there was, we didn't care what the public thought, because we took care of each other. We had each other's back. And all these things that have happened over the years, I think we've gotten away from. It's been beaten out of us. We just had a police chief in Tampa get in trouble because the deputy, showed some professional courtesy. And good God, she identified herself as the chief, and the guy gave her a break. She's a passenger in a golf cart. Everybody was up in arms, and she had to resign. Like, are you kidding me? this is, we're not supporting each other. Nobody's standing up for each other. And I don't know that I would want to be a part of that as a young person looking for a new career.
Right. And you also have I guess it's almost like a dichotomy of you have people in chief level positions who are, you know, they've been around for a while, right?
Right.
Probably 30, 40 years. And you have new people coming into the emergency services who are in their 20s. So completely different ways of looking at things.
Right.
And perhaps there's no conversation happening between who's at the top and who's at the bottom. Where if we did start those conversations, there might be some interesting connections or changes or possibilities that could evolve out of that. But I guess one of the built-in limitations of having somebody who's at the top of the food chain as as a chief level officer, they've been around, they have a ton of experience, I'm sure they know a lot and they do their job amazingly well, but sometimes they get a little insulated or out of touch with what's going on with the rank and file.
Could be little lack of humility there going on.
Mhm.
Unfortunately, I've
But
got a girl that I'm going to be interviewing. She's been on the job for 6 months,
uh,
and I'm going to speak with her next week. I said, all the people I talked to have been around forever. I
yeah,
said, what's a young person? God, I sound like my grandfather. A young person. What's a young person? Yeah. No, what is a rookie? What's a 20 something that's just got involved in the fire service or the police department?
mhm,
What Where's their head at? What are they thinking? What's priorities? You know, what do they want out of this? You know, I have never had that conversation with somebody. So I'm going to have one with a young lady next week.
that's
And
brilliant.
I'm going to, I know I'm going to be shocked because, you know, there's 40 something years between us.
Exactly. I think if I had a conversation with somebody who's brand new, I might not agree with everything they say or see eye to eye. But at
Sure.
the same time, I have noticed that there's an incredible willingness to talk about stuff like mental health and incredible willingness to be open about it and to approach things from a different perspective. And, I guess all our professions are guilty of, doing the same thing until it, absolutely doesn't work and not being that open to change sometimes. And that's that old joke about the fire department,
Right.
that we resist change, but we're in unprecedented times, right? We need to be doing something a little different in order to survive, in order to thrive.
I think the key to us turning this thing around is investing in the people coming into this and letting them know this is acceptable behavior. Vulnerability is not a sign of weakness. You being okay with not being okay is not a sign of weakness. And if we can start, it doesn't mean that we're not creating warriors. It doesn't mean that we're not creating mentally fit people. But I think if we can, the gift that we can give people entering this profession is to redefine expectations and goals and directives in a meaningful way. And then maybe, Dave, maybe you and I don't have to have these conversations, you know, talk about this 10, 15 years from now.
Mm.
That I got to say, and things don't get messed up overnight. We can't expect them to get fixed overnight. And that's a nice way. I usually drop a couple F bombs in there when I say it. So yeah, I think the future to this thing turning around is with our young people getting into this profession. They certainly are a little more open-minded to the way things are in the world. And maybe we just need to take a moment and have some humility that maybe we don't know all the answers. We don't know everything.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I think that's why what you're doing with your show and what we're doing with Responder Resilience is important too, because we are having the conversations and it's a platform where you can bring in somebody like someone who's on the job for 6 months. At the same time, the next show you could bring on somebody who's, chief level officer and talk about their perspective and their experience and bring in other people like mental health professionals. And it is amazing. It reminded me that as a retirement, it's kind of on a tangent to what we're speaking about with retirement. A lot of first responders are getting trained to become clinicians, counselors, therapists, so they can serve the responder community. And to me, that's amazing. It's such a
Yeah,
great,
a friend of ours, maybe Mike Van Meter,
right.
retired FBI agent, went back to school to be a licensed clinician.
Yep.
I mean, he's got, you know, Navy, FBI, police. He's done it all, and he's like, hey, this, I can help. I can help if I know, you know, if I can bring what my experiences and get that professional license.
Mhm.
It just makes sense, right? Just makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah. It does make sense. It gives them incredible sense of purpose and service, and it's paying it back to the profession that we all love. So we're seeing that more and more, and I think it's incredibly inspiring to see this progression, this kind of like next chapter in people's lives.
Absolutely. And speaking of this responder resilience podcast, how long have you been at it, man? We've got a ton of episodes. I love the people that you're interviewing. Tell me about the podcast, and then you know, I'll put all the information in the show notes so people can find you and follow you and listen to you. But tell me about the responder resilience podcast and how long that's been going. And it's not just you brought in some clinicians, and I just super interesting, man.
Sure. Thanks, John. Yeah, so we started it in the fall of 2021. So we're just finishing our second full season, and become sort of national in that we're on all the podcast and video platforms out there. But what makes us a little bit unique is that we have my two co-hosts are Bonnie Rumely, who's a licensed clinical social worker, but she's also an EMT, and
Nice.
Dr. Stacy Raymond, who's a psychologist who works with veterans and first responders. And she comes from a family of, her father was a police officer and a dispatcher and a Marine. So we have this ability to have conversations, bringing in the mental health piece for the most part, but we also cover other wellness issues like cancer, and toxic exposures, suicide, things like that. And again, John, what I think is amazing in having this opportunity to do is to be witness to the conversations that we can have, and some of the amazing people out there doing incredible work to help change the culture of first responders in a positive way. There are just incredibly inspiring stories of people who have absolutely hit bottom, maybe had to medically retire, or in a fatal officer involved shooting who had to, leave the profession they loved. And now they've found a second purpose and they've created a mission. And we are just pleased to be able to, give them an opportunity to speak about it and share it out there.
That's awesome. That's all. It's that's that second chapter, man. You found not only another purpose. People can find purpose, but continuing to serve the community. Now you're serving the first responder community,
Right.
and
Yep.
and that's just giving back, man. That's just, it's noble, a noble endeavor. I always like to wrap up, David. I want to be respectful of your time. I always, so there's a guy or a gal driving home, driving into work. Maybe they've been up, they've had a full shift, and they're a little eyeballs, a little burning meatballs in their head. And what's one thing, Dave, that you could leave them with, um, that their lives are better and enriched for hearing it than not? So a final thought you'd like to leave them with before we close this out.
Yeah, it's great, John. And I was that guy coming home from a 48-hour shift and sleep deprived. And I think what I would leave you with is that take a minute, whether you write it down or just do it verbally, and be grateful for three things today. Just find three things. It could be grateful I have a beautiful family. I'm grateful I have health insurance. I'm grateful I have a great pickup truck to drive to and from work, whatever. I'm grateful that I have this amazing job as a first responder. Three things. And if you can do it tomorrow and the day after that, it's going to shift you a little bit. Focus
That
on something positive, not the negative.
that is awesome, man. Gratitude. That's what we're talking about. Gratitude. Ladies and gentlemen, David Dachinger, brother, thank you for taking the time. It was an honor and a privilege, man. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, John, for what you're doing. It's fantastic, and I look forward to meet you in person in Orlando in
That's
a
it.
month.
It's gonna happen, brother. Who would have ever thunk?
Yeah, sounds
That's
good.
awesome. Thank you.